I was born Julius Robert Oppenheimer on April 22, 1904. My childhood felt almost impossibly sheltered, solitary but rich, filled with mineralogy, poetry, an early sense of intellectual curiosity. At the ethical culture school, grounded in rationalism, I learned early that my intellect could subtly manipulate my surroundings. Looking back, I'd reflect, my life as a child did not prepare me for the fact that the world is full of cruel and bitter things. It's a sentiment many scientists share, an idealistic youth, a drive to create for betterment, often crushed by the harsh realities required to make those things happen. My father's rapid ascent from poverty fueled a drive for aristocratic standards. Yet I convinced them to send me to a middle-class summer camp, where I was bullied, and wrote home about the facts of life I was learning. Despite social isolation, my academic life flourished. I graduated early in 1919, deeply immersed in literature and science. A bout of colitis in 1921 delayed college, leading me to recuperate in New Mexico. There, I fell in love with the land, discovering a remote cottage that would years later become Los Alamos. This detour deepened my love for solitude and physics, even as it revealed early signs of depression, finding solace in abstraction rather than human complexity. At 18 in 1922, I entered Harvard, soon gravitating to physics. I immersed myself, excelling in languages, philosophy, and science, quickly gaining graduate standing. My brilliance was undeniable. In 1924, I went to Cambridge, but my theoretical bent clashed with its experimental focus. Rutherford rejected me. While J.J. Thomson accepted me, the practical lab work was deeply unengaging, a jarring contrast to my effortless academic triumphs back home, and my first taste of intellectual defeat. At Cambridge, my inner turmoil escalated into severe depression, culminating in the disturbing act of leaving a poisoned apple on my tutor's desk. My father's intervention spared me charges, leading to psychiatric visits. Amidst this crisis, I discovered quantum mechanics, a revelation that steered my path. By 1926, I transferred to Göttingen, Germany, a vibrant crucible of theoretical physics. Göttingen was a true crucible. I thrived, collaborating with intellectual giants like Born, Heisenberg, and Pauli. Our intensity led to tensions, even prompting a student petition about my dominating presence, but Born handled it with tact. In 1927, I earned my doctorate. That year, Born and I published on the quantum theory of molecules and developed the Born-Oppenheimer approximation, a foundational concept still referenced today. Returning to the US in 1927, I took dual appointments at Caltech and UC Berkeley. In 1928, a brief stint in Leiden earned me the nickname Oppie. That summer, my brother Frank and I leased a remote cabin in New Mexico, a place I would eventually make my own. Returning to Berkeley, I became a mentor, transforming the institution into a premier physics center in the US through collaboration with Ernest Lawrence. My work with Richard Thoman also ignited an interest in astrophysics, leading to pioneering work on black holes. The 1930s were formative. My academic work soared, hinting at black holes, yet my life churned with internal complexity. Relentless work, fueled by an almost self-destructive asceticism, left me exhausted. My emotional landscape was turbulent, marked by intense romantic entanglements, notably with Jean Tatlock. Her radicalism and battles with depression mirrored my own, leaving an indelible mark. As fascism tightened its grip on Europe and the depression ravaged America, the detached elitism of academia crumbled. My home became a hub for union organizers and anti-fascist causes. Though never a party member, I moved within communist circles, drawn by their fight against injustice. This marked a genuine moral awakening. I immersed myself in literature and Hindu philosophy, The Bhagavad Gita, with its fatalistic tone, resonated deeply, profoundly informing my reflections on science and destiny. Towards the decade's end, my life found a new structure. In 1939, I met Kitty Puning, a sharp biologist whose past spoke to a shared intensity. We married in 1940, with the birth of our son, Peter, for the first time embracing a conventional domestic role. But as the world fractured with war, my abstract physics was about to become a terrifying geopolitical force. The stage was set for my transformation from reclusive theorist to public scientific leader. As the 1930s closed, my personal life stabilized, but the world fractured. In 1938, nuclear fission was discovered in Germany, shattering scientific illusions. The abstract nucleus now held unimaginable destructive power. Émigré colleagues, fleeing Nazi persecution, understood the chilling urgency with a visceral fear I was only beginning to grasp. We had lulled ourselves into false security. The mounting horrors of war, the nightmare of Hitler wielding this power first. It was a call to conscience. My deepening political engagement converged with atomic energy's terrifying reality. I, a reclusive theorist, was inexorably drawn into the public sphere, wrestling with the moral dimensions of unleashing such power. The question became, by whom? And at what cost? The early 1940s were a whirlwind. In late 1942, Enrico Fermi achieved the first self-sustaining nuclear chain reaction in Chicago, a monumental achievement. The theoretical was hardening into terrifying reality, built with cinder blocks by a university football team. This unprecedented endeavor required a new kind of laboratory, a secret city built from scratch, hidden away by fate or irony. The site chosen was a remote mesa in my beloved New Mexico, the very location where I'd sought solace years ago. There, amidst the piñon and sagebrush, the true burden of my life's work began to take its terrifying shape. General Leslie Groves summoned me to lead Los Alamos Laboratory, the Manhattan Project's secret heart. He saw in me an unlikely blend of theoretical brilliance and the ability to unify disparate scientific minds. I arrived in March 1943, assembling the greatest collection of scientific minds. Fermi, Feynman, Bethe, Teller, many émigrés who understood the visceral stakes. My leadership was unconventional. I fostered open scientific exchange despite intense military oversight. We worked with furious, desperate intensity, driven by the specter of Nazi Germany developing a bomb first. Challenges were immense: theoretical unknowns, unprecedented engineering, and logistical nightmares. Amidst the intellectual fireworks, the human toll was immense. Cramped living, enforced isolation, the presence of my own family, Kitty and Peter, added personal complexity to the high-pressure environment. Ethical questions were ever present. We understood the destructive potential, but the pervasive belief was that this weapon was necessary to end the war, to prevent greater casualties. We raced against time, against an enemy capable of unimaginable cruelty. Years of relentless work culminated in the summer of 1945. The gadget was ready for testing at Trinity. On the tense night of July 16, 1945, at 5:29:45 a.m., it detonated. The pre-dawn darkness was obliterated by a blinding, searing light, followed by a shockwave and a grotesque mushroom cloud. Raw, unleashed power. In that moment, I recalled the Bhagavad Gita. Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds. The terrifying beauty of the explosion was inseparable from its horrifying implications. We had succeeded, but at what cost? Truman made the agonizing decision: On August 6, 1945, little boy devastated Hiroshima. 3 days later, Fat Man annihilated Nagasaki. The war ended swiftly. Relief was immense, but inextricably linked to horror and responsibility. We, the scientists, had given humanity the means of its own destruction. I was hailed as a national hero, the father of the atomic bomb. But the celebration was hollow. My public persona shifted, burdened by immense moral weight. The atomic bomb had fundamentally altered the human condition. After the war, I became a tireless advocate for international control of atomic energy, believing an unchecked arms race would lead to catastrophe. I argued passionately before Congress and the UN for transparency. My famous quote, "The physicists have known sin, and this is a knowledge which they cannot lose," encapsulated my moral anguish. From 1947 to 1952, I chaired the General Advisory Committee of the AEC, advising on nuclear policy. I argued against the hydrogen bomb, believing it a weapon of genocide that would accelerate the arms race. This stance, combined with my past associations, put me at odds with powerful figures, particularly AEC Chairman Lewis Strauss. As the Cold War intensified and McCarthyism swept the nation, my advocacy for international control and opposition to the H-bomb were viewed with suspicion. My pre-war left-leaning sympathies, my relationship with Jean Tatlock, and associations with suspected communist ties were meticulously scrutinized. In 1954, at the height of McCarthyism, my security clearance was revoked. This administrative hearing was a public inquisition to discredit me. My past was laid bare, distorted, weaponized. Edward Teller's testimony was particularly damaging. The hearing was a grueling, humiliating ordeal. My life, loyalties, and character were dissected. My security clearance was denied. I was banished from the halls of power, ostracized by the government I had served. It was a profound fall from grace, a public shaming that stripped my influence. Though my public career was over, I continued my intellectual pursuits. At Princeton's Institute for Advanced Study, which I directed until 1966, I returned to theoretical physics, lecturing and writing on broader philosophical questions. My later years were marked by quiet dignity, contemplation, and continued engagement with science's moral implications. The 1954 hearing left an indelible mark. I continued to smoke heavily, eventually suffering from throat cancer. In 1963, President Lyndon B. Johnson awarded me the Enrico Fermi Award, the nation's highest honor in nuclear science. It was a bittersweet, partial rehabilitation, recognizing my contributions but not fully lifting the political shadow. I died on February 18th, 1967, at 62, in Princeton. My life spanned unimaginable transformation. I was a man of paradoxes, a solitary intellectual who led a massive communal effort, a pacifist who built the most destructive weapon, a revered figure who became a public pariah. My legacy remains complex, forever intertwined with the power and peril of the atomic age. I was Julius Robert Oppenheimer, and I had become death, the destroyer of worlds.